here because that's the most important. I haven't had to call somebody back yet and go, you know what?
Can we do it one more time?
Wasn't recording. Okay. So, Mike, just for records, tell me your name, spell your last name, and what are you running for?
My name's Mike Schmidt. My last name is spelled Schmidt, and I'm running for Multnomah County District Attorney.
Why do you want the job?
Fundamentally, because I think we need major reform in our criminal justice system. I started out as a high school teacher and saw firsthand with my students in their lives in New Orleans how the criminal justice system impacted them as victims of crime, witnesses, sometimes children of incarcerated parents, and sometimes defendants themselves. So I went to law school, studied criminal law, thought I could get in the system and be part of the change, worked in the district attorney's office, prosecuted there until 2013. And although I felt like I was doing good things, I fundamentally didn't feel like I was changing the system. So I jumped out and had been working on criminal justice reform at the Criminal Justice Commission, a state agency where I'm the director for since 2015.
And what is your job there? What does that mean, working for them?
Yeah, so I'm the head of the agency. We have a commission, but I'm appointed and accountable to the governor. And what that means, our mandate by statute is to improve the effectiveness, the efficiency, and legitimacy of our state's criminal justice system. So I've worked on things from how can we decrease our prison usage, because building more prisons means less money for things like education and healthcare. But at the same time of using less prison, how can we make sure that we're getting better public safety results, less recidivism, less victims in the community? So I've worked on that. I've worked at reducing disparity in our criminal justice system, looking at how our laws are applied and whether or not they're equally applied to different races and ethnicities, and they're not. And so we've worked on ways and policies that we could change that. Racial profiling, tracking that data across the entire state, supporting drug courts. We work on all kinds of things that are programs that make our communities more safe and our criminal justice system more effective and fair.
So were you a deputy DA in the Multnomah County office?
Yep. I started there as an intern in 2007, and I left there to go to the legislature in 2013.
Gotcha. My dad was a juvenile parole officer for 35 years. I remember him explaining to me his frustrations with the system because it'd be these wild swings from we need to let everybody out and rehabilitate them. We need to lock everybody up and throw away the key. And I feel like when I'm talking to people like Josh Marquis or talking to the ACLU that we're in one of those swings now from Measure 11 back. Isn't there a compromise here in the middle?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's not necessarily looking for the compromise, but it's actually using data and research to see where can we get the most public safety. So it's holding nobody accountable and then not prosecuting anybody, arresting or sending anybody to prison. That's not going to accomplish the most public safety. On the other hand, we know that we over-incarcerate in this country, and we're an outlier in the world for that. And we're spending more and more money on incarceration instead of the things that we know that work, like education, healthcare, our foster care system. So there absolutely is a place between those two polar opposites. And what I've done at the Criminal Justice Commission is been looking at different programs across the country, even internationally, to see where do we get better results if we try to do those things. And how can we do it in a way that is the most cost efficient, but also the most effective to decrease victims in our community? So for me, let's try something. Let's test a new program out like we have done multiple times in this state. And then if we're getting better results than what we were getting before, then let's do that.
So I'm trying to drill a little bit deeper here, what the difference between you and Ethan Knight is. You've got these people, Jennifer Williamson before she was there, and some other people that were really like, let's open up the doors, let's really change things and liberalize things. And you've got the legislature kind of gutting the death penalty. And then you got people like Josh Marquis, and then people like Steve Dole. Measure 11 can't be messed with. It's got to stay. Can you further define where you are on that spectrum?
In terms of those issues that you've brought up, the death penalty and Measure 11, I fundamentally don't believe the death penalty is a good policy. I've pledged not to seek it if elected as district attorney. And we wrote a piece on this, but to give you the synopsis, first of all, in terms of public safety, states that don't have the death penalty are not any less safe than states that do. So there's no public safety difference between states that have it and states that don't. It's extremely costly. I've talked to our former Chief Justice Paul DeMunez, who's done a lot of research on this area, and he says 60 to 70% of Oregon's death penalty cases end up coming back on appeal. That means we're more litigation, we're bringing the victims back in again, we're having to go through all those things. The same is not said for cases that are not at the death penalty level. So, I mean, there's a lot of costs. There's bringing victims over and over again back in the system. I've spoken to people who have had members of their family murdered. And even some people who originally thought the death penalty was what they wanted. And what they've told me, and this is, not, I think victims are like everyone else, they're on a spectrum. But I've definitely spoken to many who have said that it didn't give them the closure that they thought it would. Didn't provide them with, the comfort and the solace or any of that. So, I think as a policy, and in Oregon, we have a moratorium. And so we're not executing anybody anyway. So to seek a very costly penalty that we're not going to use doesn't make sense. So on that issue, that's where I'm at. On mandatory sentencing, Measure 11.
Measure 11. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's and it's another distinguishing feature between me and my opponent. I don't think mandatory sentencing makes sense. I think it way overswung the pendulum to the right. It took, essentially what it did is it took the power away from judges to decide what the sentence should be based on hearing all of the information. And so what we've essentially done is we've created this two-tier system. For the most serious and the most violent crimes, which Measure 11 are, those are the most serious crimes in our system. The judges do not have the authority to impose the sentence that they think makes the most sense. But we trust judges with everything below that to make the sentences on all of our other crimes. So judges are independently elected officials in our communities. Why would we not trust them to do that? Measure 11 has shifted the power over to the prosecutors. So essentially, whatever you're charged with is going to dictate what sentence you're looking at. And nobody, not even the prosecutor, can reduce that sentence from the mandatory sentence prescribed by law. So we've shifted all the power over to them. I think we should shift it back. I think defense attorneys should make their best arguments to the judge. Prosecutors should make their best arguments to the judge. Victims should be heard by the judge. And that's why we have judges to sit there and say, based on all of these circumstances, all of this information, this is the sentence that I think makes the most sense for justice, for our community, for public safety. So I think it's not necessarily the sentence lengths that are out of whack with Measure 11. It's who gets to decide. And I think it should be shifted back to the judge. That's our adversarial criminal justice system.
I've been covering news in Portland for 22 years, and when we need to talk to district attorneys about issues, Terry Shrunk, followed by Rod Underhill, some of the most tight-lipped district attorneys around. You should not even try because they'll just say no. Will you be more upfront or more vocal about your opinions?
Yeah, so Mike Shrunk, Terry was
his father. Yes, right. Thanks for correcting me. Yes.
Yeah, no, but and Mike Shrunk, who hired me when I got my start, and for me, when I was in Mike Shrunk's office, I was a low-level deputy, so I wasn't in those decisions. But for me, one of the biggest challenges that I see facing law enforcement, prosecutors, everybody, is that they have been too tight-lipped for so long that it's created a lot of distrust in the community. At the Criminal Justice Commission, I have worked on making our system more transparent. So and what that means is if you go on our website, you can see recidivism rates in every single county, how much prison every county uses, arrest rates. It's all published there transparently. I want to do the same thing in the district attorney's office. That is a missing piece of data that really is not available anywhere across the country. District attorney's offices are, as you described, much more tight-lipped, and they hold the data a lot closer, and they hold their opinions and views. in this race. So transparency in the office is going to be a huge thing for me. I've been endorsed and backed by a lot of community groups who have very serious concerns about how their members have been treated by the criminal justice system. And I have been outspoken in this campaign about the things that I think need to change. And I'll continue to be outspoken in that regard.
Several months ago, I did a story about the staff at the DA's office choosing to remove the pictures of all the district attorneys going back decades. And one of the reasons was that they were all white men and that it made people feel uncomfortable, either people, employees there, or the public. You and Ethan Knight are both white men. Is that going to be an issue? I mean, there's some irony there.
You know, I do think it's an issue. I think it's an issue that both of us, either of us, are going to have to face head on. And I think what you need to do to try to, you know, make sure that you're running the office as well as you can is bring in diverse staff, diverse employees, so that you have a more reflective office of what we have here in the county. But also, most importantly, not just to hit the numbers, but because different people's races and ethnicities brings different perspectives and different lived experiences. And I think that's absolutely crucial in the people that get to make some of the most serious decisions in our community about how public safety should be handled, about what kind of sentencing recommendations or charging decisions are made. You know, my background and experience as a high school teacher, like I started off by saying, you know, I think gives me a certain lens in thinking about when I saw my students and then how I saw them get into the criminal justice system. And one of my kids was arrested at the age of 14 and spent a weekend in a solitary confined jail cell. I mean, that really impacted me as a teacher and then colors my view going forward. We need to make sure that the deputies in the office, the administrative staff in the office, are reflective of those diverse experiences, and then figure out a way that we can also bring the community together to have input into what they are seeing and whether or not it's working for them, and do it in a coordinated, ongoing way.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Dan, it was great to talk to you.
You too. Press stop here.